Hi, I'm Dev from Mega 65, and you're listening to Scene World Podcast.
Hey, it's the Scene World Podcast. He's Jörg. My name is AJ.
Yes.
How's it going?
Good.
How's your throat? Have you recovered from the?
Still having some issues from the shouting at Gamescom.
Yeah, it was an active time over there.
Yeah. Yep. I will 500,000 visitors.
That's pretty good. Now,
I mean,
did you get 500,000 visitors, or did the whole place get 500,000 visitors?
The whole place.
Okay.
We probably got like 90% of the 500,000.
Yeah, exactly.
Everybody is loving the retro area, so
yeah, the retro area is the best part. In a sec, we have Andrzej Wisniewski. He is making new C64 power supplies, which is one of those things that's in heavy demand because the power supplies that Commodore made sucked.
And for the C128.
Yes.
And for the Amiga.
Yes, but those power supplies didn't suck They didn't suck as much. In fact, my the 64 that I'm using right now, the power supply is it's the same thing as a 128 power supply, but it's the power supply that came with the RAM expansion units way back in the day. So, and they were they were much more stable, and I think they may have even been switching power supplies, unlike the Sadness resin brick things that came with the stuff. Did I ever tell you what I did with my original power supply?
No.
My original C64, which was from the 86 or whatever, had that little brick that was full of resin and had kind of fins on it, but didn't do anything because they were made of plastic. And for some reason, like, the computer would just sort of lock up after a while, and I realized that it had to do. It was entirely like proportional to how hot that power supply got. So, being a kid, I thought it would be a good idea to take the power supply, put it into a plastic bag, and submerge it in ice water. Which actually worked. It worked for like a good year until I could get a replacement power supply.
Oh, okay.
Because it was I guess it was overheating and the voltage was going wonky or something. I don't know if it was dropping or going too high. But putting it into the ice water...
If it was going too high, it would have been toast now.
Yeah, so I guess it wasn't doing that. But that ended up working for a while until I got a replacement.
Here in Germany, the power supplies from the bread bin model, the first model, we called elephant toe.
Yeah.
Because of the shape.
Oh, is that they were kind of like sloped a little bit?
Yes.
Oh, okay, yeah, I've seen those. Yeah, were they all full of resin too?
What's resin actually?
Resin, it's like glue. It's like this is real hard stuff.
Not that I remember.
Oh, what they would do, and there's videos on YouTube. You can find web pages about this. I know at least in the U.S. and lots of Europe as well. They would take the power supplies, they'd put the board and all the the components in the board in the case, and then they would just fill the case with this hard plastic glue stuff.
Okay.
This resin and it was, I guess, to both seal it and prevent tampering and to act as kind of a heat sink, I guess, though I don't know how effective that is. So it makes him impossible to fix because you open up the power supply and it's just two wires going into a brick. They're like a solid, dry glue brick. You can't, you can chisel away stuff maybe, but it's awful. The 128 power supplies and the Amiga power supplies did not have that. In fact, I think the Amiga power supplies even had vents to allow for air to get out.
Okay.
I've got one right over there.
But actually, he said they will go bad too eventually.
Well, eventually anything will go bad, but they're much less likely to go bad than and they put out they put out a higher range of voltages because the 128 had to handle all the extra chips, and the one that I've got for the 64 it was made for the RAM expansion, so it's got the ability to handle that extra load. So it might not be putting out the optimal amount, but it's still putting out plenty to handle what I've got plugged into it. And I think they also, if they do go bad, they just kind of go bad. They don't blow up your machine like the other Commodore.
I wouldn't be too sure about that.
I think they're a lot safer in that regard. And they've also got a fuse, which is nice.
Anyway, I'm glad he agreed to the interview.
Yes.
And we talk about power supplies.
Yes.
Hey. Yeah.
Before we do that, that'll be in just a minute. Don't have too much to cover this time, I don't think, because I don't think anything has happened, really.
Well.
One thing
start with it, I would say.
Well, one thing I did see, we mentioned last podcast, I brought up the Mega 65 again because it's awesome and I like it.
Yep.
And I was saying that they were still plugging along, getting there slowly but slowly.
Yeah.
And then, 2 days ago, Paul Gardner-Stephen, who we talked to, posted on Facebook that the new keyboards and keycaps have come in, and holy God, they're pretty. And there's pictures of it, and we'll link that in the podcast description. But There's pictures of it next to stock Commodore 65 keyboard, and the new ones look so much nicer and easier to use. And they did this thing with the shift and caps lock keys, where like the Amiga keys have just a little hole with an LED behind it. Mm-hmm. And they sort of did the same thing with this, where there's a notch cut out of the key with a little...
Just like the SX64 that worked the same way.
Yeah, the SX64 was just like the Amigas, yeah. This one has a little notch cut out in the bottom of the key to allow that light to get through. And they just look beautiful. So...
And we discussed this caps lock topic with Lau Prex, who actually ships the keyboards.
Yes,
and I'm having one in the post waiting for me.
Awesome.
Now I just need the keycaps.
Gonna do a review video on that?
I'm not very good at review videos.
Who cares?
Not as good as you.
My review videos have 2 minutes of a grasshopper eating a piece of corn. So I mean,
people love it.
Well, so those are two things that are cool. I still want a Mega 65 real bad, but we'll see when they come out.
So we discussed the question if the keyboard is too expensive.
Yeah.
Or if it's actually worth the money. We will see.
Honestly, I think that when you're talking about preserving this kind of thing, I feel like if this keyboard gives the ability to preserve it in a better way, because right now most Commodore keyboards have springs and little contacts that have to push down, and rubber things that go bad over time, circuit boards that get crusty and old over time. My old 128D, the keyboard was totally unusable on that thing. Didn't matter how often I cleaned it, didn't matter what I did to it to try to fix it. It was done. And you get something like this, where it's your high-end like cherry switches and all this stuff that is easier to, if something does break on it, which is pretty unlikely, but if it does, you can replace the switch and continue on. And it gives it that longevity that I think that the original hardware kind of lacked, because nobody thought about, when they made the original 64 hardware, they didn't think about whether it was going to still be usable in 2018.
Yeah, right.
That wasn't even 2000 was still the future. But now stuff like this, Lau is sort of looking into, is this going to still be working in 2040? How well is this going to continue to work into the future? So I think it's a good thing. And I think I would say it is worth it, because again, it gives you that kind of extra insurance that your machine isn't going to explode tomorrow. Or if it does explode, at least the keyboard's still going to be good.
Yeah.
There's so many new things, with the 64 reloaded boards. It's a brand new board that helps to eliminate a lot of the crap, like the PLA chips and stuff like that always went bad.
But this creates new issues. I mean, I was showing a friend here the Sam Journey, and the cartridge didn't boot. Why did the cartridge not boot? I figured out because it has not an original PLA.
Huh.
And the PLA is incompatible with Jens Schoenfeld's cartridges.
Now, would it work with a 64C? That has the super PLA. It's not a real PLA.
That works.
That does work. Yeah. Okay, so in that instance, it's probably just a matter of a firmware update that needs to get pushed out to the board. I would think.
No. The PLA replacements cannot be updated.
Okay, they can't be.
Yeah.
Well,
most of them have switches.
Right.
So switch between the different modes, and but that's about it.
Okay.
And it's known. I mean, for example, one says it does not work with the Apex fast loader, which is good because I got a different one that works with the Apex fast loader. Okay. Because the Apex fast loader cartridge, the original one, is one of the few cartridges that works on NTSC and PAL.
Yeah. It's funny, I talking about the Apex fast load. I got into a discussion about this on I think it was on Facebook, where people were talking about the Apex fast load and how it's the most awesomest thing ever. And it struck me funny because I remember back in the late 80s, early 90s, in the US anyway, people used to dump all over the Apex fast load. Because that's what I had, because it was the cheap one. Out of all of them, your Super Snapshot and Super Explode and all that other crap, the Apex fast load was the cheapest of the group. And everybody at the time was, if you were serious about it, you had the Super Snapshot or whatever. Nobody had the Apex. That was a piece of crap. Today, in 2018, the Apex fast load is the cartridge to have. Which is it's hilarious looking at it in hindsight because, I can't believe how much people used to dump on it when it's a perfectly serviceable. It's not as fast as the Super Snapshot.
It has a crude interface, like non-existent.
Right. Oh, the interface sucks. Yeah, it has an interface. If you hit the British pound,
I know.
Yeah,
I know. Yeah.
But I liked the thing I liked about it was kind of that transparency of it was there but it wasn't there.
I know why it's slower than
it doesn't blank the screen
than the others.
It doesn't blank the screen.
Yeah, it doesn't blank the screen. Yeah, exactly. That means it has less IRQ resources or something.
Yeah, I mean it was a perfectly workable thing. But again, everyone back then was, if you were serious about it, you had either the Super Snapshot or you had Jiffy DOS.
Here in Germany, here in Europe, it was Action Replay or Final Cartridge.
I hate the Final Cartridge. I hate it so much.
My grandfather loved it because of the graphical interface, and he could use it with a mouse.
It's as a proof of concept and as a gimmick, it was kind of cool. Like, hey, look at that. But then there's nothing to do with it really. It's with that little graphical user interface, you can select all these different little things that are built into it. But then, it's like logo editor. Let's try that. And it just goes to the freaking Centauri logo editor.
No. Before he had the Final Cartridge, he always typed in open to format a disk and waited for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And when he got the Final Cartridge, he was like, wow, I can format the disk within 20 seconds with a click on a graphical user interface. How awesome is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, the Action Replay could do it in 10 seconds, and it would load faster, and the freezer would be more compatible. But my grandfather, the only game he actually played was Lemmings, and then he was using it for VisaWrite to write letters.
Right.
So that were the two primary users he had for the C64. So the Final Cartridge 3 was perfect for him because he loved the graphical user interface.
Yeah, I had it. I wasn't a big fan, but it was, the fast load was pretty quick, and it's one of the few that works with the SD to IEC devices. Final Cartridge and Epic's fast load work with them. Super Snapshot does not. For speed, I don't care much about how long it takes to load it. I like to have the cartridge for like the DOS way, so I don't have to type, open 15, 815, and all that nonsense. I just put the @ sign and then your command.
Well, I liked the action replay more because you could just use the F keys.
Yeah.
To jump through menus and letters. Because it was a much quicker way than using a graphical user interface.
Yeah, right.
But for a 70-something years old computer user, he loved the graphical user interface. He wasn't a gamer so much, just when he played with me. But when he used it himself, he used it for Lemmings and Visa Ride.
Do we have any other news? Is anything else going on?
Not really much.
It's a nice, quiet Commodore week.
Well, everybody was concentrating on Gamescom, seriously.
And trying to squeeze whatever little bit of summer is left before it gets cold, and then everyone comes inside and starts doing things again.
Well, we have 31 degrees here in Germany today. I can't complain.
Yeah. Anyway, so I guess that's about what we got for this one. So Andrzej is waiting right there to talk about some power supplies. So
yeah,
let's go hang out with him.
Get the power to you.
Yes.
Okay, let's start. What do you want to know? I was a bit surprised with your invitation, because Scene World magazine is not, how to say, I'm making the PSU, so it's not very related with things you are talking about in your magazine.
Well, I think it is in a way, because recently we spoke to Lau Prex, for example, who is working on the C64 keyboard.
Yes, I saw this. Yeah.
And Peter Reichenbach, who is working on a C128 remastered. So I think this has something to do with it. And it's especially interesting because I know here in Germany a lot of people in the 90s made power supplies out of PC PSUs, and they stopped doing that like 5 years ago because of the EU regulations, and said it's too dangerous to do it because if something goes wrong, you are responsible for the fault, and that is why most people don't do it anymore here in Germany. So I was very happy to see somebody in Poland, even with a CE sign, is doing power supplies and not something somebody would build at home, but really professional, with a manual and with a proper casing. So that is why I wanted to talk to you, because it's something special.
It's nice to hear. In fact, this PSU from my company are not considered as a commercial project.
Seriously, okay?
Yeah, because it's a side project. I'm involved in something different. In business, in life, and this was something like a hobby project, a side project of my work, and perhaps it looks like it's released for the money or a business, but in fact it's not. It's like a side project of my company. The main purpose was to give some alternative power supply for Commodore C64 to preserve some of these old computers, as the old PSU can be dangerous, and you know it for sure.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
You know how things are in the C64 community. When somebody starts something new, rumors are spreading and people are doubting it. It's like the C64 Mini, but it started like 2 years ago from the Indiegogo campaign. People were like, maybe this is fake, maybe they are just taking the money and not releasing anything. People are really very doubtful when a new project is starting. I think it is because in the past there was a lot of promise for the C64 hardware community, and a lot of people never released, you know. So
Yeah, but
I think that is why people are skeptical from the first place.
yeah, they are skeptical, and you know, the community, I mean the retro computing community, not in general, not only the Commodore 64, they are quite closed, you know, as a community. So if something new just showed up, they are really skeptical, and there is a lot of hate, you know, because when I was releasing the first units, it was in Poland about 2 years ago. It was really not very good at this moment. It was the first prototype stage, and I sold about 5 or 10 units just to gather some of feedback from the users. And mostly it was good, but there always is some user that is spreading the worst information about this PSU into the internet, into the forums, and not getting back with the feedback to support this project or help with developing, but just I don't know. He's pleased with spreading the how to say, it's something about marketing. I see maybe there is a conflict of interest somewhere. Okay, as I said, it was never considered as a commercial project. You have to understand that making this kind of PSU is really time consuming. You have to hire some men to assemble the units. You have to pay them, and this PSU is not very expensive, as I can see. There are some jokes on the forums that it's not even as expensive as one full fueling of your car, you know. So maybe it's a good reason to give it a try, because my main idea was to give a reliable power supply with a low cost. It's not a real problem to make the PSU for 100 or 200 euros, and it will be superb, as you know. But the problem is when you have to set your limit about 40 euros and take some profit from this to pay your employees and taxes. So the margin you have from this sale is really low. It's not considered as my commercial or business life, but it's more like a hobby, you know. You said you've bought one of these units. Are you satisfied with this or not?
I'm perfectly satisfied. I mean, I even wrote you and asked you if you can do C128, and you wrote me like, maybe it's too expensive because of the dedicated power plug Commodore used. Mm-hmm. And then like a few weeks later you released it, and it was at a good price, and I was like, wow, great, they really listen to feedback, you know.
Yeah, but this kind of feedback is very constructive. I can, you know, it's a pleasure to hear some kind of constructive feedback, but most of the feedback I got is positive, but the people left just giving positive feedback, but they are not explaining it. giving no information. If I get some information, it's usually connected with negative feedback. It's really rare. As you can see, the feedback on eBay, it's 99% more than 99% positive. But if something interesting is happening with the feedback, it's always related with negative feedback. So this feedback from you is very constructive and positive, and this kind of it can really move the things forward.
There is this American guy that also does power supplies, and he started releasing the 220 volts one for the C128. It's not bad. It cost like 110 euros with the German VAT I had to pay on top of it. But it looks like homemade. It doesn't look like a professional power supply. And if I have the choice between a professional-looking power supply with a CE sign and something that looks like homemade, I would rather go with the professional one, and that's the thing.
You mean the Ray Carson's PSU from USA, or something different?
Yes.
Ray
exactly.
Carson. Yeah, but you know him. Yeah, I think you should know him as the guru of
I know who he is.
64 repairs. Yeah.
Yes.
And his power supplies are good, but they looks like homemade. But for sure they are protected and will never harm your Commodore. But it's expensive, especially when you are trying to buy and get one of these to Europe, from
exactly, because the VAT is coming on top of it. And sometimes you have the problem that custom is controlling the parcel and saying, there's no CE sign on it, so you have to return it to sender. Sometimes that's a problem. But Ray Carlson, he's selling it over fulfillment by eBay, and then eBay is making all the custom stuff, though they are not checking you personally. But the problem is the parcel service is really rough with the parcels, and when the power supply arrived, the metal had a big dent in it from the shipping company, unfortunately. It worked, but you can see it has been beaten up by the parcel shipping company, unfortunately,
Yeah, and the second thing, the USA AC voltage is different. I don't know if this PSU were tested with European voltages or not. Probably they are universal, yeah?
No, he is releasing a separated version for America and separated version for Europe. But the reason is when I plan to use them, let's say at Gamescom, at a big fair, or anywhere officially, I cannot come up with a homemade looking power supply. That's a bit of a problem, especially when insurance is asking you what is that and what it's worth. If you run a booth at Gamescom or any other fair that is professional, they will ask you, what are you going to exhibit? Is this thing what you show secure? So I'd rather go with something that looks professional.
We are talking about very old computer gear, yeah? So it's 30 maybe more years old right now. If you are using original power supply, it's not CE marked too. So yeah, so the Commodore computer itself is not CE marked too. So right now, if you are able or if you can make a test for CE certificates for the Commodore computer itself, it won't pass it. You know what I mean? So,
I know. Yes. Fortunately, the rule says only devices from 95 or newer have to pass the CE certification. So
Yes, yes,
Older
yes.
devices don't matter.
Yes, but just to have a entire view on this problem, we are using very old computer gear, 35 years old, let's say, and we are using old PSUs, power supplies, that are not. Did you ever open the original power supply from
Never.
Commodore
No,
64?
I'm not a professional. Never.
You have to take one of the broken ones and try to open it and see what's inside. You will be a bit shocked, I think. So right now we are taking the new power supplies and we are replacing the old one. The old one is made with a large transformer and it's taking the current or energy even if it's not in use, if just plugged into the main power. Yeah. So we are changing it for a new one. It should be considered, I think, as a part of a vintage computer systems, let's say internal part, not the general purpose PSU. So you can take this PSU and connect to any other equipment. It's dedicated for computer only. So
you said it's a hobby project. So how did that actually start? And how did you start with that retro hobby? Is it like with most people with playing video games?
I'm 40 years old right now, so it was probably early 90s, because in Poland we were very delayed. We were behind Iron Curtain, because we have Russian influences. So Western world was 2 years ahead, especially in computers. So as Commodore 64 was probably very popular in 80s in Germany, in Poland it was about 5 years later. So in my case it was about 90 or 91. I got my first C64 computer. It was used one. We cannot afford for new one, and it was hard to buy it in Poland. So I started with the games, of course, and it was maybe it's weird right now, but it was illegal games. I mean, we cannot afford to get legal software, and the law in Poland, the regulation in Poland, was very. How to say? It was not prepared for the copyright for software. So everyone, including governmental or universities, governmental offices, or even big companies, were using illegal software these days. So the games we were using on the C64 were also mostly illegally, copied by from the tape to tape. You know what I mean? I don't know how it was back days in Germany.
I had no original as a kid. No way. All cracks with nice intros and stuff.
Yeah, but a lot of software came from Germany here to Poland already cracked. So the intros and the music in intros and the cracks in those were often very much more interesting than the game itself.
That's true, actually, yes.
Yeah, the game was spreading just because the intro from the Cracker group. Yeah. Yeah, I remember some of the intros, and they were really interesting. And the game after the intro was often a disappointment. Disappointment. Okay.
So how did that start? That you said, I'm making now my own power supplies and giving the supply to seniors worldwide.
It was a very hard start because for me it was side project, some kind of how to say way to relax. I sold my original C64 about 20 years ago, maybe 30 years ago, and I returned in my memory to these moments with C64 very often, and I decided to buy some used computer or some kind of eBay Polish version of eBay called Allegro. And these used computers are very poor condition. So I put my guys buy 2 or 3 of them and put from 3 units 1 working. So when it was working again, the memories came back. And I tried to load some very old games to show them to my son. I have 2 sons. One is 5 years old, and the second one is 3 years old. So I want to show them the old school gaming. And guess what? Just after 15 minutes, my C64 just blew up. Okay, I buy another 2 units, and one of them was working. So prepared my original 64, and it turns out that the RAM chips were bought. So I started to investigate what's really happened. And I'm electronic engineer. I have a master degree, so
should be a cake for you to do that because you are professional.
It's not. This was easy. I mean, finding the failure case, but the C64 is not a really easy design. It's from current perspective is really weird. If you are looking on the schematic and on the board, sometimes perhaps only the developers know the ideas they put into this board. But from our current perspective of digital electronics, we know right now, nowadays, it's weird and some kind, it's kind of interesting and beauty in this old gear. Okay, but I finally came up that the PSU was faulty and the voltage was probably too high and my RAM chips get burned. I was frustrated and angry, so I decided to make my own PSU, replacement one. The strange thing it was that measured voltages from the original PSU was correct. They were nothing wrong with them. So I think this was a very short voltage spike. The high voltage spike on the 5 volts line that burns your chips, but you can measure it with multimeter or something like this. It's happened when old capacitors in the PSU are malfunctioning. But I decided to make a new PSU. First, I just buy a regular PSU and connect to my C64. But I realized that there is no replacement PSU on the market, so I thought that it will be maybe a good idea to make this kind of PSU and offer to other users to prevent them from this frustration I had with my own, in my own case. So I made 5 units and 5 or 10 and sell them in fact, not to earn, to get any profit, but to get feedback. And the feedback was mixed. Some was very good, and the other was devastating. So I just listened to the feedback, and one by one start to make the things better. And right now we have 6th or 7th release of the PSU, I mean version, and which every next version I fix some issues we have according to feedback from the users. But right now the feedback is quite good, and the users are mostly happy. So I believe we are close to the final stage for this kind of PSU. I know there is some bad rumors about this PSU, but it's mostly about the very first units. They were sold only in Poland, and I agree it was not ready then. It was about 2 years ago, but now it's totally different. We are using the very good quality components. For example, the transformer units are made in Germany, so they are CE marked by manufacturer, German company. And switching mode power supply module we are using is also very good quality, a good well-known company, also certified by CE markings and some of other certificates. So this gear right now it's quite good quality and should be durable and work as it should for a very long time. I've added some protection, additional protection to these units. I mean over voltage protection to prevent some kind of over voltage stages, but just in case, because they shouldn't happen with this architecture. But just in case, just in case, it's the trigger is set very low. I mean about 5.2 or 5.3 voltage. And if something more than this value will came from the PSU, it will be shut down. So for the computer, I mean the Commodore C64, it's safe.
Well, I gave you the feedback that I really would like to have one for the 128, and your answer was that maybe it's impossible and maybe it's turning out to be too expensive. And then, as we said, a few weeks later you released it. And it's not too expensive. It's, I think, like 10 euros more than the other power supply I bought from you. That is a Z64 and 1541 combo unit. So let's talk a bit about that. Why is such a problem to make a C128 power supply?
You know, it's not a technical problem with the PSU itself. The problem is with the power plug. You know, the power plug is very specific. I mean, it's a rectangular shape and 5 pins DIN plug, and they are very rare at this moment. It's very hard to buy them. I have one source but the plugs are expensive. And at the moment you gave me the feedback with the C128, I didn't have this source for these plugs, so that's why I said it will probably too expensive, because I was considering to make my own plugs. I mean, with the 3D printer, or to order some injection mold to make the connector by my own. But finally I found the source for these connectors, and it was possible to release the bigger PSU, stronger, for C128. This computer is not very common, not very popular, so I do it like a hobby. There's no profit from this model because I sold just a few units. It seems that C128 was really not very popular in Europe. Perhaps in Germany it was more popular, but in Poland it's really rare. I have my own unit here at my office to test the power supplies, but it was very hard to find the working unit here in Polish market. Do you have C128?
Yes, I have two of them, and that is why I bought it. I bought one from eBay that was broken, and the power supply did a clicking sound when I was shaking it. And I was like, okay, you're not going to connect that. That sounds dangerous. So... that is why actually I was buying the power supply from you, because I got the one from my grandfather repaired, and I didn't want to instantly break it again by connecting a bad power supply.
Are you using the CPM system or on this computer, or?
No, not really. Not really.
This will be very interesting. Okay.
Does it make a difference if you use the CPM? Does it make a difference for the power supply?
No, not for a power supply. I'm just asking because it's interesting, you know. This system was quite interesting, and
it was unfortunately too slow. Too slow on the C128, and that is why it failed.
Yeah, maybe you're right, but it was very interesting, and I never used this mode in the C128, so it will be interesting to run this maybe just for a try. Okay, but
never
it's not
did it either, but it's a good project for the future to take on.
Yeah, maybe. For the power supply point of view, this is making no difference. So you can use it with CPM or regular C64 emulation, any mode you want.
I mean, the C128 has a whole different set of other problems. For example, you barely get any monitor that can display the CPN mode in color. Most cables you get for LCD TVs are just black and white. So that's a whole different problem there. So not only are you missing a source for working power supplies that are secure, but also finding a 1084 monitor that you connect it with, because your TV will only show the CPM picture black and white.
Yes. You know, I'm using it in C128 mode and in C64 mode, and I'm connected to the LCD monitor with the cable. I don't know the cable type at the moment, but the picture is maybe it's just a cable type. It's weight of electronic and electric equipment. So this regulation is also very hard to obey. For example, I have for every pay a fee. For every single unit I put on the market, you know, so it will be best for me if users processing the new PSU will return his old PSU to me, and I will make a professional waste of this. But they never want to to do this, as they want to keep the original PSU for sure. Yeah. I don't know if you understand what I mean.
Yes, of course. If you have the original PSUs that mostly kill device anyway, you can use the components of the old PSU and recycle them and reuse the materials from it, right?
Yes, but in fact it's also how to say, this regulation, I mean, is not working, simply not working across the European Union. But we are talking about the politics or regulations right now, and this is not the subject of our interview.
I mean, let's face it. Where does many old electronic and even cars go to? To Africa.
Yeah.
Will they recycle it afterwards? It stopped working totally. I doubt it,
This recycling process in Africa is better than in Europe, I think, because they are really taking out every component and reusing it, or using this as it is. So instead of manufacturing new components or new power supplies, they are using the old ones. If they are good, yeah. So it's good to have some common sense of reason. I don't know how to say. You have to think. I mean, not follow the rules without thinking. Yeah.
Of course, yes. So I wonder, as you said, some feedback is good, some feedback is bad. Are there any future plans for your power supply project?
Yes. First of all, I have to make this unit. There is few issues right now reported by users. So I have to fight these issues.
Seriously? I mean, how much can you improve a power supply? I mean, it's working or it's not working, isn't it?
It's not exactly like this, because there is several physical. How to say, for example, if your system is drawing very high currents, I mean 3 or 4 amps, and you are using the power cable that is almost 2 meters long, there is a voltage drop on the cable itself.
Okay.
And it's significant, it can be 0.1 or 0.2 volts. So perhaps in my next PSU release, I will move up the output voltage a little bit to compensate the voltage drop on cable. But it's a bit dangerous for the systems that are not equipped with the modern cartridges or SD card or something like this, because the voltage may be too high. So I have to make a good balance, or make a PSU that is giving the regulation for the users, so the user will decide how should be the voltage level at the PSU output, so it will be adjustable. It's not important for maybe for regular user, but some advanced users are connecting very large amounts of equipment to the Commodore systems, and it's drawing a lot of current. So in these cases, this may be significant. So I think they are the potential customers for the new model with adjustable output.
Interesting. I have to admit, like 20 years ago when I joined the demo scene, C64 and stuff, my grandfather was the technical wits. He did all the, repairs and all that stuff. And I know in 1998 I got a super CPU, and in the manual of the super CPU they wrote only use Commodore power supplies that has the label on it HiPod tested, or otherwise the system will not work. And I remember that if I had power supplies not with that sticker on it, that sometimes, the amount of bytes free wouldn't be correct, or the system wouldn't turn on or suddenly turn off, just because the power supply couldn't handle the super CPU. And I even had a few cases where my grandfather had to replace the power switch. And I never understood to this day why the power switch had a problem when the super CPU was connected.
In fact, the super CPU is not drawing too much current. As I remember, it's about 0.5 amps more, or maybe even less. So, but stronger power supply was recommended. I remember that the users were using C128 PSU for the super CPU. I have one customer with the super CPU, and the feedback was good. But he's using the combo PSU. I mean the one for the Commodore C64 and the floppy drive, but without the floppy drive. So the current output is close to 4 amps. So it will handle the super CPU and some memory extension card too.
Oh, that's good info. Never tried that. I still have it. Maybe I should try it sometime.
I don't know if there is. I didn't. Perhaps but I didn't know the software using the RAM extension. So I cannot. Even if I have one, I will never have a chance to use it actively.
Well, I mean, there are a few things that are working on surprisingly good. For example, Test Drive is working perfectly on it, because when the coders did code Test Drive in '87, they made a frame rate limitation in the game. So despite you have 20 times more speed, the game is never running too fast. They are locking the frame rate, so it's running a lot faster than on a stock C64, but it's not running too fast. So I'm really using it for such games sometimes. It's really a pleasure, And sometimes there are even super CPU fixed games, so the game wouldn't run too fast. And that is my main use for the super CPU, I have to say. So I can enjoy some games without using emulation.
Okay. It seems you're really passionate,
Well, I'm passionate, and I'm really happy to live in these times where so many people are releasing new hardware, recreating power supplies and keyboards. Of course, it's not cheap, but it's a decision. Either risk the life of your machine or invest some money in it and make sure you don't kill it with a working power supply. You don't kill it with a broken power supply, of course.
Yeah, but the power supplies is on the one end, and the very interesting hardware projects are on the second end on this entire retro computing world. So sometimes you know very well that there is a lot of interesting projects for C64. I mean the hardware projects. So let me say it straight. These projects will be never comply with modern rules because and regulation, because they will have to be mass produced to make some money to make the test and certificates and so on. So here in the retro computing world, we are stuck in some kind of closed environment. There is very hard to release some kind of new hardware and make it comply with the all regulation around that are releasing or relating to modern electronic equipment. The sales of this PSU are not very high, and the margin.
That's surprising me. I thought more people would buy it.
You can see how many people is buying on eBay. Around maybe 100 units were sold from the beginning, so it's not a large scale of production. So I think you are a bit overrated me at the beginning.
Who knows? It's anyway an interesting topic to talk about, nevertheless.
It's not mass production. It's not large scale business. I'm related, not related, but I'm involved in some other business in electronics. But the PSU, as I said, is side project. But if I will take the C64 PSU as a single project or separate project, it's probably not making any. I probably have to put some money into this to run this.
I see.
That's why I was a bit surprised that you want to speak about this. And as I said, my main reason to release this PSU was to save some of these old beautiful computers, to make them work a few years longer, or preserve them for future generations, like my child's, my sons, that they are growing up in the world that is infiltrated with the electronics and internet and computers. That's everywhere. In your watch, in your telephone. For example, you can use a watch that is stronger than C64. Yeah, I mean the CPU inside much stronger. So they can't understand the beginnings. Yeah, so it's good to preserve some units to last 10, maybe 15 years longer, to be able to show them. I mean the childs like my boys after 10 or 15 years, how it was in the 80s. I think it will be 50 years ago, this moment. Yeah. So it's some kind of home museum, but there is a lot of some kind of sentiment in people growing up in the 80s, and they are reaching in their memory to the first computers and first coding experiences and gaming. So they are looking at the attics and the garages and the basements for the old computers, forgotten for 20 or 30 years, and they are trying to run it, and sometimes just burn with the smoke because of PSU or something like that. Yeah, so perhaps just for these people, it's better to change this PSU before they will try, or if they want to play some more, perhaps it's good to buy new PSU. But what can I say? It's not the perfect PSU. I mean, we can make it better, but it will be not at this price range. And one of my first, one of my first points when I was considering leasing this PSU was to make it affordable. To not to make it too expensive. But you will never reach the real people because it will be simply too expensive. I think it will be better to buy few Commodore units and make them burn one after another.
Yeah.
Instead of paying 200 euros for PSU.
It depends. I mean, we had the same topic with Lau Prex, who's working on the replacement C64 keyboards, and one unit will probably cost about 120 euros. And we also had this question, will somebody ever invest so much money in a keyboard, But the thing is, it's probably depending on how much you harden on it. As I said, the C128 is from my grandfather. It was broken for 8 years because he died before he was able to repair it, and I just got it back a month ago repaired. So I don't care if I invest 60 or 70 euro just to make sure I don't break it again by connecting a bad power supply. It's family memory for me, and I want to archive that memory. And I'm sure there are a lot of people out there that would say, take my money, I don't care how much it costs, I just want to make sure I don't break it,
Yeah, but I don't want to have a feeling that someone is paying too much for this. That's why
you don't want to rip off people.
Yeah, it's if you will open this PSU, I mean my PSU, you will see the components. If you want, you can open. You will see the components. This is they are quite good quality. So the price, the final price you're paying for is the assembly price, shipping, packing, and the components, and very low margin to keep this business running. So if I will have to live from the PSUs, I probably will never keep on going, because there is no profit on this, it's something like a mission to deliver this PSU to the market, to save some old computers, to make high money on this.
Attitude changed a lot. I remember 20 years ago people said, if your C64 is broken, just waste it and get a new one, trash it and get a new one. But nowadays, 20 years later, when prices are getting high on eBay and old devices are getting rare, people are rather for preserving and repairing. So this whole repairing business is coming up again, in a way, And now that we have this retro hype, everybody is is in the need or wanting to relive the 80s. We don't have enough computers from the 80s to make everybody playing them, you know. So
Yeah, but
it's not so easy actually.
Yeah, but it's not only about the price, because probably for the West Europe there is no big problem to pay 100 or 200 euros for C64 working in good condition. But
that depends on what your job is. I mean, if you are hired in a call center here in Germany, you really can't afford to travel or buy something expensive from the internet. It really depends how good your income is, you know.
Yes, it's exactly like here in Poland, but if you have to pay 200 euros in Poland, it's really a lot of money here, and this is the price for a very good quality and working condition Commodore 64 here, yeah? I mean, tested and in working condition, from 100 to 200 euros. And you are getting no warranty that it will work few days more, you know. You can receive it and it's broken, and without the warranty your money is simply lost. So the problem is not the price but the quality of this gear. So if you have the working machine at your home or on your desk, it's probably better to take care on it, to preserve it, to make it working longer, instead of thinking about replacement to another one, because you will never know what will came from the eBay action or something like this.
Exactly, yes.
Sometimes it's really trash, you know. I mean,
that's true.
I've ordered several, you know, because of this PSU and because of the memories, I start to buy some old computers, and my home collection getting larger and larger, is out of control right now, I think. So I have several C64s, Amiga 500s, C128. So I know this condition of the gear that I was buying on eBay or some kind of places is really poor. So sometimes I have to open 2 or 3 units to make one working from these components. So and also they are already repaired, so they are not sealed, you know, by the original seal, but were already opened, so you never know what's inside. Yeah, returning to PSU, we've released the Amiga 500 PSU also, so it's also retro computing, maybe not like C64, but there is a lot of people using Amiga and big Amiga community. I don't know if you like this computer or not, or if you are.
Of course I like it. I never had it. I mean, we went from the C64 straight to the PC.
Yeah, but here in Poland, the Amiga 500 was like a dream. If you had Commodore 64, you were dreaming about Amiga, but it was too expensive, so we simply can't afford. And even the diskettes were very expensive here in Poland. So the software copying were difficult, because in you know, I was really disappointed a few years ago when I get my first floppy drive for C64, because when I was young, and I was using my first C64, I was using the tape.
The data set.
data set and that regular, sets, I mean tapes, yeah?
Yeah.
And they were in turbo mode. I never knew the regular mode recorded tape these days,
Oh, okay. I had no idea.
Yeah. I never have a single game or any software recorded in regular standard mode. All were in turbo mode. I mean the ABC Turbo or something like this. And I was extremely disappointed when I got my first floppy drive for the C64. It was 2 or 3 years ago. Because it's slower than the turbo datasets, yeah.
That's
So
true, yes. That's
I-
because of a design flaw in the operating system for the serial
Yeah.
data transfer. They never fixed that.
Yes, you can fix this by your own, but I was disappointed because when I was a child, I mean the teenager, I was considering this floppy drive like a, holy grail. I want to have it, but it was too expensive, so I can't afford. But after 25 years, it's turned out that it was slower than the datasets that I was using. Of course, it has some advantages, but the speed is not one of them. So
I had an interesting experience recently buying a floppy game on eBay. I got Last Ninja, a game that you probably know, right?
Yes.
It's a famous
Which
game
part?
from '87. Everybody loved it, and it's from System 3. And the thing is, they were British, and in UK, most people didn't want to buy the expensive floppy disk games. They just went for the much cheaper tape versions. Though the disc version of Last Ninja is poor crap, seriously, because they are using a fast loader that is constantly accessing the disk drive as you play the game. So it's a real floppy killer, because even the old 1541 that has the internal PSU inside, they would break after a few hours running non-stop. So I was really like, are they serious? And you cannot switch off the drive because then the fast loader routine in the floppy memory will be erased, and then you can't load the next level. So
yes,
the UK was really bad on some floppy disk releases. I was so shocked. I mean, how can they release a game like that, I mean, even in '87, you could buy the game and buy a second floppy because you would probably kill your first one that you have.
But I have a different experience with the Last Ninja. I started with Last Ninja 2, not the first, but the second version, And I saw these graphics and wow, I was really surprised. It was something new. I never seen something like this, and I want to play it, but I had no floppy drive. So the hackers here in Poland, probably in Germany too, they just cut this game into the levels, and each level was saved separately to the tape, and you were loading the single level, playing it, and after finishing this level you have to load another one from the tape. But of course, if you had some kind of weapons or something to carry from one level to another, you lose this, so you can never finish this game, but you can play each level to see some climate or to taste it, without floppy disks. So the Last Ninja is the game probably everyone remember.
I just remember the first release on floppy disk because it was poor crap. Just because they never cared about using a loader that is really useful. I guess that is why it's so expensive nowadays to get it on floppy disk, because nobody bought it back in the 80s in UK because people were too cheap. Like, why should I invest £20 for a disc version if I can get the tape version for 10, you know?
Yeah.
So
you are buying these old original games. You like to do it classic way. I suppose.
I'm a collector. Yes.
So you are not using this SD to EAC devices. I mean, using the SD cards or image. Floppy images.
I have an Ultimate 1541, but I use it for tape remastering, I have to admit. And for disk transferring, I'm using Warp Copy, and I'm using a retro replay with the RNet network adapter. So I'm doing it over Ethernet.
Yes.
That's converting. Okay. That's for me a lot more convenient to make it over the internal network than fiddling with USB sticks and SD cards, you know.
Yeah, but this what I want to preserve is the classic way. So to make the copy of the game to the discs.
Sure, I have a parallel floppy, and I'm imaging the original discs, including the copy protection.
Yeah. So because I want to show this to my sons, how it was back then in the 80s, and to do this, I want the classic way. I don't want to use SD cards or internet, because the spirit of the 80s is disappearing then. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So this was also the reason why I was releasing the PSU. Okay, do you have any other question about this PSU? Because
but one thing I didn't ask, how do you pronounce your name? Because I'm really poor on Polish name pronunciation.
This is in English is Andrew, and in Polish is Andrzej. Andrzej, tak. It's good. Your pronunciation is almost perfect.
Almost. Thank you.
Yeah, it's very hard.
And your last name?
Oh, it's difficult.
I would pronounce it like Wisniewski.
Yes, it's very good. Very good. Yeah. Very good.
Okay.
So you had to practice, I think. I don't want to talk entire night. So thank you for the interview. Thank you for invitation. Too. Keep up the good work and keep on going.
Same to you.
Yeah, your magazine is very interesting. I didn't know about it before your invitation.
Okay.
Right now I have an eye on it, so I will look your Facebook page and what's happening and next interviews. And I wish you all the best.
Thank you. Same to you. Keep in touch. Good night.
Good night. Bye.
Bye.